Hi, and welcome back to
Inspired to Game. I'm Sean.
And I am Lola. Today we are talking about Foxpaw by Godot Games, who we want to thank for sending us a prototype of this game to review. Now, before we get to that review, we'll give you a very quick overview of how it's played. In Foxpaw, you are students in a magical school competing for the most house points at the end of 5 years. To begin, each player will choose their student and their house and gather their associated beginning materials. Each house has its own special powers. On each of your turns, you will simply choose a location to place one of your student workers. If it's a daytime space, these are resolved immediately. Daytime spaces include the farm. This is where you can go to gather prophecies. Completing these prophecies will earn you prestige points. Here you can also attract a magical beast. This beast becomes an additional worker for you with its own unique power. As well, there are locations to spy on the upcoming magical events so that you can prepare ahead of time. At the kiosk, you can gather resources. And at the teacher's lounge, you can do various actions such as cutting in line, bribery, tattling, sucking up, or calling in sick. Each of these actions will earn you a darkness card, depending which teacher is active this year, as there are some teachers which may favor a certain house or give extra punishments to another. Now, the rest of the worker placement locations are resolved at the end of the placement period once everyone has placed all their workers. These locations include the sports field. The sports field allows you to build strength. The library allows you to build your knowledge. Place a worker at the study hall if you want to purchase a new broom or wand, if you can afford it and have the amount of strength or knowledge you need for the purchase. And at the classroom, you can learn new spells. Finally, every player must place one worker at one of the night spaces, either the dormitory to go to bed early or the night carnival to sneak out and have some fun. All these locations are resolved in order, ending with the nighttime locations. The first location resolved is the dueling arena. 2 players will be dueling, with the other players being the audience, betting on the outcome. At the end of the years 2, 4, and 5, a magical event occurs in which all houses will compete for additional house points. Once this is scored, the prestige tracks will be scored, seeing who has earned the most stars for that period. They will get additional house points, contributing to the end of the game. Once you have finished the 5th year, see who has won the most house points and is the winner of Foxpaw. First off, the artwork here is absolutely phenomenal. It's bursting in colors and life, whether it's the board, the cards, the animals are adorable. Everything about the artwork here just makes me happy.
And I love the dual player boards. I mean, they're fantastic for keeping everything organized. The silkscreen meeples are great. It's really a nice looking game. And the expansion that will have the actual physical wands, that's something really going to be cool to look out for.
And keep in mind that this is all a prototype, so everything you see here is a work in progress potentially. Now, the mechanics here, it is a very straightforward worker placement game.
And typical resource management, but this adds on a element of prisoner's dilemma in the dueling mechanic. It's really an interesting part of it.
Yes, as well as betting. So whoever is not dueling, they get to bet. So that is an element we see here too. And the worker placement aspect is not your typical worker placement as well. So there are the certain locations which trigger right away on placing them, the daytime locations, whereas the other ones you're essentially queuing up your locations that will be executed later on after the worker placement phase is finished.
And add to that, of course, the element that every player has to choose a nighttime space. There is a dictation to your worker placement that you have to fulfill every round.
And it's fun having the choice too, because if you go to the dormitory, you're going to bed early, you're going to wake up with more energy. If you were the first one there, you'll actually gain some reputation. But if you choose to sneak out and go to the midnight carnival, there's going to be rewards and some detriments to doing that, which will also include sliding to bed later at night, potentially losing some reputation and getting a lot less energy because you're up all night. And then there's also the element of accruing a magical beast. Now, each beast that you get You can only have one beast unless you have the house that allows for an extra one, or you get a beast or a card that allows you to have another one. But they each have their own power as well and operate as just any other worker. So now you have that extra worker. The only thing you can't use them for is to go to bed for you. Now the theme really shines through here from absolutely everything. It is fully integrated through the experience.
Yeah, the structure of the round as running from day to night, the fact that, you know, the classrooms, the teachers that are adding different elements to the punishment of each round, it really feeds into you are in a school for 5 years.
yeah there's so everything is really like, even going to the space that lets you spy on the magical event so that you can get a heads up and know how to prepare, and going to bed at night, every element of this, and of course the dueling too, every element of it works so well. It really captures that spirit of that magical school that we at one point all longed to go to. Or at least many of us. Waiting for their letters. Now, for luck strategy balance here, I would put this as a solid medium weight game. There definitely is a crunchy decision-making element that, in fact, sometimes led us to some analysis paralysis. We absolutely have to admit that. Yep. But there is also a solid dose of luck to this game, too. This is a high player interaction game. There is a ton going on here. So there is the duel, where you're literally just dueling each other, as well as the magical events come down to direct competition to see who wins. Then, of course, there's vying for the worker placement locations as well.
Yeah, there is no bump mechanism currently in the game, so if somebody takes the space that you needed, well, maybe next year.
Yeah, exactly. And there's even opportunities to steal mischief cards from each other. These are cards that give you some bit of an advantage or ability to do something, can be quite valuable. As well, there's an opportunities to even potentially give each other darkness. So there's a lot going on that's direct interaction.
All the backbiting and sniping that you would expect from a magical high school.
Yeah, no kidding. Now, for the two-player experience, this game really shines at a higher player count due to the higher player interaction.
At a two-player account, you are playing with an automa house, which is going to be taking certain spaces, but they are in control of the other two players. You split their workers in half. Somebody gets the odds, somebody gets the evens. So they are still taking up space. Dueling is still existent, but you don't get to bet on it anymore.
Yeah, and one thing with the automa character that you're each controlling that plays heavily into the two-player experience is it can kind of turn it into a bit more of a take that experience, because instead of it just being another player that's doing their thing and putting things where they need to do, you can specifically see that that person is going for a wand this turn and cover that space so they can't do it. There are ways to intentionally block another player with doing it, so it can make the two-player game a little bit more aggressive. And there's also magical events that are not available outside of the four-player game because they just don't have enough players in order to enact them. Now, we've played it at 3 and at 2, and we definitely preferred that third player experience versus the two-player one. Now, our overall gameplay experience, there is a whimsical energy to this game that makes it a lot of fun. It's playful, and yet there's a lot of tension because of all the interaction and competitions that are within it. One thing we found is with a limit in the worker placement locations could sometimes be a little frustrating if there's a place that you really felt you needed to get to in that round and you weren't able to get to it. And we certainly did deal with a good amount of analysis paralysis for what's actually not that heavy of a game. One thing we found consistently with all of our plays as well is that the last round never felt quite as tight. There wasn't as much to do because there was some redundancy in things that, well, there's no point in doing this, there's no point in doing this, unless you needed to gather something for the final magical event if you knew what that was. Overall, though, I found this was a really creative design with a lot of unique elements to it.
Yeah, one of the most interesting things I found was the prestige track at the top of the board that you would score points through each year, but it was only taken the score of or evaluated after each magical event, so after rounds 2, 4, and 5 at the end, and that would add up to house points at the bottom, which are the actual victory points of the game. So it was an interesting, well, as they say it, an intermediate scoring.
The magical events are a really important part of the game. This is a huge amount of victory points that you're going to wind up with at the end of the game. So you can't neglect either one. You've got to be prepared for those magical events, and you got to keep up on those stars as well. So it's very interesting, the dichotomy of these two scoring mechanisms that work in tangent together. Another unique thing that I find is how the worker placement locations will trigger at different times depending what location it is, and how that resolves around the board. And then of course the dueling and having that prisoner dilemmas element in deciding how to duel and how that is won. Now, an interesting thing too is if you don't want to decide on the duel, if you're going to attack or stay or whatnot, you can use the duel to get rid of extra darkness cards, because darkness cards each, they'll have a value of 1, 2, or 3, and at the end of the game, whoever has the most accrued will lose victory points depending on player count. And so you don't want these. However, if you're dueling, if you do the choice that's on a darkness card, you can get rid of that card. And then it doesn't matter so much if you won the duel. If you were able to at least get rid of that 3 darkness, well, that was a good outcome for you and can be worth it.
So because of the way the game is set up, as you choose 4 houses, you can choose whether to follow your parents' wishes and gain the extra permanent stars and the extra money at the beginning, or if you go against their wishes, or if you are an orphan, you can actually choose a house and get their 2nd level asymmetrical power to use throughout the game. So with those 4 houses and essentially 1 or 2 powers that you can use, there's a lot of replayability, a lot of chances for you to try different things with different houses, and then all the random elements of the pets and whatnot. So a lot of stuff to try in subsequent plays.
Yeah, and even also as well with the various magical events. There's a number of them and they rotate around randomly, so there is definitely a good amount of replayability to this game for sure. So, is this game for you? First off, it's a very basic worker placement, but has some elements of twist. It is a solid medium weight game that's fairly crunchy in decision making, but still has a high luck component. It also has high player interaction, a very strong theme, and really beautiful artwork and theme to it. As well, we do feel it plays better at higher player counts. So we have had a ton of fun with this one. It is currently on Kickstarter, and we will have a link to the campaign in the description down below. Thank you so much for watching us today.
If you've enjoyed this content, please support our channel by subscribing.
And as always,
happy gaming, folks.
For additional points, whoever wins the event will get additional house points.
I don't know what I'm trying to say. I was just kind of vamping.
Which okay, I'll start again.